am Megan Ballard, Professor of Law at Gonzaga University. Fulbright Scholarship is a grant authorized by Congress under the named, of course, after Senator Fulbright. And there are a number of different Fulbright awards available. The Fulbright that I have been awarded has been called the Fulbright Scholar Program. There's also a Fulbright program for students or recent graduates. And the Fulbright Scholar Program really comes in 3 different flavors. So you can get a research grant, or a grant to teach, or a grant to do both. And these are all grants that award research or teaching in a different country. I think pretty much all international work and travel is really interesting, but being in Tbilisi, Georgia was something I had never imagined doing. So for me, it was a fantastic experience. The class that I taught was an introduction to American law, and thankfully I was teaching in English, not Georgian, and we can talk about what the Georgian language is like in a few minutes. But I taught a class of about 30 students, all fluent in English, an introduction to US law. And they were all law students in Georgia. So that was the class. We met for about 3 hours twice a week at night. And the building was this beautiful but very old stone and cold building with the steadiest of electricity, and a couple times the lights would go out in the middle of the class, or internet was definitely very spotty. But hey, there was a roof, a floor, I had a whiteboard, and the students were really engaged. Georgian is different from anything else. It uses an alphabet that's different from the Cyrillic or the Russian alphabet. No other country uses the same language. It is just Georgian. So I learned a whopping vocabulary of about 100 words. There were many people in shops and other areas in the university who spoke English. So I was very lucky to be able to get by with an incredibly limited Georgian vocabulary. But there were some things that you really needed Georgian language for. Taxi cab drivers, for example, didn't speak English often, and some grocery store clerks at the market, that sort of thing. So I was able to give rudimentary directions and could point out my favorite fruits and vegetables and generally communicate quantities. And the reaction of Georgians when you try to speak their language was just very warm and delightful. I had older women in the marketplace pinch my cheeks and grin beautifully when I would butcher 5 words, but it was really fun to try and speak it. So my research focused on the rights of people who had been forced from their property because of different wars affecting Georgians. And Georgia had done, so the general area involved is the idea of post-conflict property restitution. Under international law, there is no absolute right to get the return of your property. If you lose it, you're forced to flee during a war. But Georgia, there's an emerging aspirational, I don't even want to say body of law, but there are guidelines that suggest how countries and the international system can establish a way of returning property rights. And Georgia had taken what I thought was a very interesting step to catalog the rights of people who had been forced from a breakaway region called Abkhazia, forced from that area into Georgia. So the country of Georgia had done what I thought was a unique and interesting way of trying to catalog and identify those properties. Now, there is no restitution, there's no ability to return to their homes yet, but if and when that ability to return arises, there is what is believed to be a fairly good and reliable database of who had what ownership interest in what part of property in this area. My first experience was in 2010, and I applied again and was awarded another Fulbright in the country of Jordan in 2018. I understand it's sort of rare to be able to get 2 Fulbrights in a professional career, and I feel very fortunate to have been awarded 2 grants to do somewhat related research, but in 2 very different parts of the world. It's a rigorous process, and I was really happy to be able to get the second grant as well. So in the fall of 2018, I traveled to Amman, Jordan, and that's where I was based. I taught a course at the University of Jordan at the Center for Strategic Studies, and thankfully, again, this was an English language instruction on international refugee law. And those students were not law students. It actually was a professional degree program run through the Center for Strategic Studies at the University of Jordan. And that was an amazing experience to teach about refugee law in an area so affected by refugees. It's a very competitive process. In fact, I was just asked if I would be willing to serve on a peer review committee for people applying for Fulbright grants in law. It's a tough process. There are numerous vetting levels. So to have 4 of us from the law school go through that vetting process successfully, I'm not certain, but I think it's fairly rare. During both my Fulbright experiences, I had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with Fulbright colleagues from all sorts of institutions around the United States. And I didn't talk to anyone who came from an institution, whether it was a political science department, English teaching department, across the board. I didn't meet any Fulbright colleagues who shared awards with so many people in such a small department. So I think Gonzaga Law is fairly unique, and I am very thrilled to be in such good company with my colleagues.